Families Select Committee. I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting and just remind everyone that this is being broadcast live and recorded for publication. Item number 1. We're here to note the appointment at full council on the 7th of December 23 of myself, Councillor Mike Introna, as Chairman of this Children's and Families Select Committee for the remainder of the 23-24 municipal year. James, could I have any apologies for absence and any substitutions? Thank you. And thank you to those councillors that have come in today as substitutes. Number 3, minutes. I am asking that the committee approve the minutes of the last meeting. Are there any issues with those minutes that anyone would like to raise? No. Can I take a show of hands from all those that were present at that meeting too? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 4, declarations of interest. If any councillor or officer has an interest in any matter on the agenda, you should declare it now. Please raise your hand now if you have an interest to declare. If you have an interest to declare, you should state what type of interest it is and give us some brief details. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. It's on my register of interest anyway. I'm chair of the Diverse Academies Trust, and we have 2 special schools within our trust, both of which are based in Mansfield.
Thank you, Councillor Quigley. Anyone else? No, thank you. So, agenda item number 5, partnership progress in improving the experiences and outcomes for children and young people with SEND. I understand that Colin Pettigrew is not with us this morning. So, Peter, are you able to help with this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. Members of the committee will have a copy of the update reports. We're bringing to each of our select committee meetings an update on the progress following the SEND inspection, which took place just over a year ago to date, and the improvement work that's outlined around the 2 priority areas and our areas for improvement across the local area partnership. We have further scrutiny of our SEND improvement activity through the SEND Improvement Board as part of our governance arrangements as well. But we feel it's really important that it's also cited here, and obviously the tie-in with some of our reporting through Governance and Ethics Committee. The report details progress made to date and some of the activity underway to address both the identification, assessment and provision for the needs of children and young people with SEND and education, health and care plans, including the delays in the issuing of EHC plans and assessments and the activity and progress being made there, alongside work around provision and services available for children and families. There is good progress being made in a number of areas outlined in the report. We, as a local area, have met with the Department for Education for our deep dives back in October, and we had a 6-month stock take at our improvement activity in January or December, I think actually, really recently, which again highlighted good progress in addressing the areas identified for improvement across the local area. Most notably, our timescales for EHC assessments are improving significantly, and that is progress that needs to be sustained. And there's a lot of work taking place with education settings as well, across early identification, graduated approaches, and tracking the impacts on children and young people who have got additional needs within mainstream education. So it's an ongoing improvement programme, and we'll bring an update to each of the committee meetings going forward as part of our scrutiny. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So I'm going to move the recommendations on page 21 and seek a seconder.
Chairman, I second reserve right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. And I'm now going to open to the floor for debate. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I welcome you to your position as Chairman and wish you all the best while you're sat in that seat. Two relative questions that I'm sure are quite easy to answer. And I don't think there's anybody that's not impacted by SEND within their division, and also in Allerton, which is has its own inevitable issues with regard to SEND families. Paragraph 15, to ensure, the second to last line, to ensure that the impact of these measures can be demonstrated in 2024. We've got a timescale within 2024 rather than just an open 12 months. And paragraph 21, which I think is really positive, or it reads positive, but again it's open-ended. And the last bracketed wording is pending confirmation of funding streams. Well, when can we expect funding, or when can the families expect to have a response from the funding streams that will be put passed through to us? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the first query about the timescales for tracking progress for children and young people with SEND support and complex needs within mainstream education. That's actively underway at the moment. There's a pilot project currently taking place with 2 families of schools, which involves secondaries and their feeder primary schools to implement that. So that will be trialled through this academic year and rolled out in September to other areas once it's been tested and adapted. But it's actively underway at the moment.
So, Chair, just to confirm, so we're expecting results of the trial to be put forward to us in September, so we understand the results here.
That should be possible, yes.
Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. Page 3, paragraph 10 or point 10. As of November 23, 28.3% of our children and young people receive their EHC plan within 140 days, compared to 4.5% in 2022. Looking at our graphs, obviously, it's still below our regional and statistical neighbours. So, what are we doing about that? And then point 24, the work undertaken today, you've put it in 22 months and then you've put it in weeks. If you can either put it in months or weeks, don't, mix the two up, not for my maths brain anyway. So families are still waiting a significantly long time, although I will admit it has gone down, but still over a year to get a referral for an appointment is still a long time for children with SEND. And then point 25, you've put in about focused activity with shared care record to speed up the assessment programme. And obviously we've put CAMS in, but we know that CAMS have got a massive waiting time. So for me, I'd like that to go on the work programme, if at all possible, so we can work out a little bit better understanding of why and what's happening for children's mental health, again for a significantly long time to get a referral or see anything. And that's it, thank you. It's a little bit long, but...
Okay, thanks, Councillor Carlton. We're going to talk about work programme later, so there's no issue having that discussion then. Colin.
Peter, that's okay. Sorry, I realised, and apologies, I didn't respond to the query from Councillor Pringle about paragraph 21. Just to say that would sit with our colleagues in the Integrated Care Board, who would be able to update on that. So we'll have to seek that update outside of committee. They were invited to be here, but due to the revised dates, they were unable to attend today's. So apologies for that.
Chair, if I can, I understand that, but we all use telephone. Yeah, surely I would have thought we were able to get an update to the pending confirmation of funding streams. I don't think it's difficult. If we're going to put it in a report, then surely there should be some acknowledgement as to the timescales when it should be accepted. I'm not asking for anything that I don't think we should have as members generally, to be quite honest.
Yeah, so apologies, but I was unaware that health colleagues were not going to be here when this was published. I will follow that up outside, and I will make sure that that is confirmed to you and members of the committee.
Okay, but again, you've read the same papers I've read, and it's in paragraph 21, bracketed, so it's an important piece that you want to come across for everybody. Okay, not just for one person or for one group or ICB or somebody else.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just reiterate, health colleagues were invited to this meeting. When these papers were published, they may have been able to attend the original date, so they would have been able to provide an answer in this meeting to your question. The meeting date for today has been changed. Health colleagues unfortunately can't commit to the new date. So at the time of publication, that answer probably could have been answered. Question could have been answered if they were here. They're not here. We'll go away and get you the answer.
Councillor, just to reiterate, we are all here for the same thing and getting the same responses. This is a bracketed section of paragraph 21. I'm not being belligerent. If we're putting this in, then surely we should have a timescale of funding, not for me, for delivery of the services for the people out there that need it, to be honest. I'm very disappointed that we can't, or we can deliver a paper, and yet with the groups that we trust to deliver information on a simple item, funding, we can't deliver.
Well, I don't think it says we can't deliver, does it? It just hasn't been clear about when the funding streams will or won't be confirmed. And I think it's a pretty reasonable question, Councillor Pringle, to ask when will those funding streams be confirmed or not, and be confirmed by. So, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what's important to note is not that the answer isn't available, it's that the people who can answer the question are not here to answer it. And I understand your frustration, Councillor Pringle, but this is a scrutiny of a partnership arrangement between the local authority and healthcare colleagues, and those colleagues should be here to answer your questions in the same way we would expect external partners to be here for a number of scrutiny streams. So you are asking, in one way, the people who don't have the information to hand, because the people who do have it are not present to answer your question. And I know that doesn't help you today, but officers have offered to chase, and I don't think that we can do anything else in this moment.
Let me go on, okay, because we're around in circles. It's a simple question. The ICB and yourselves talk together, is that right, Councillor Taylor? Councillor Smith, yeah, I'm assuming so, yeah? All we're looking for is an answer to pending confirmation. Let's get rid of that. Let's put a date on when we're going to get some confirmation, which has been sort of indicated that we could have had that information had the ICB been here. Now, if the ICB aren't here, phone them up, say, hey, mate, do me a favour. Paragraph 21, we've got a bracketed thing which sticks out like a sore thumb. What information have you got on it? Yeah, let's not defend it. I haven't put it in there.
Pringle.
I haven't put it in there, Chairman.
Oh.
Yeah, this report hasn't been written by me.
You've made your point. You've made your point clearly. I certainly don't disagree with the premise that we ought to have a date by which things are confirmed by. But as the Cabinet members and officers have explained, the people responsible for giving that answer aren't here today. And yes, we potentially could or couldn't. It's very easy to say that we could have done this or could have done that. That hasn't taken place, so can we make sure that we're having the conversations with the relevant people so that we can get that answer as soon as possible? What do we think might be a reasonable timescale to ask that question so that we can circulate that answer to the committee? Please.
So I think we can seek confirmation of that within the next week and provide that feedback to members in terms of the date that's required. But the feedback is also helpful in terms of future iterations of the report, so we'll make sure that we're more specific where around dates so that members can be assured of the progress.
So would it be reasonable to expect a response by the end of next week? Councillor Pringle, comfortable with that?
No, of course I am. Yeah.
Thank you.
The question isn't the response and the figure. The question is that we've highlighted something that we've now not got information for. That I find is bizarre when we're actually in a committee meeting to discuss exactly that. I really do. I find it bizarre. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Any others? Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. It's really interesting because we seem to go over this in many committees about SEND and the lack of or the improvements of. As I'm sure the Chairman wouldn't expect me not to mention, I always have concerns when it talks about the SEND and improvements and things. I think we do a good job in fairness. The problem is it's so broken up into different areas. It mentions in here the speech, it mentions in here the mental health, it mentions in here about many different things. But what it never mentions is dyslexia. We know dyslexia is a major one, but obviously you have to pay privately. We know that ADHD assessments is a 2-year waiting list. We know that mental health, because I went to see a doctor a few months ago with my little girl and we were told there's a 3-year waiting list for her to see CAMS. I spoke to another family a few days ago who were waiting for an ADHD assessment and being told there's a 2-year waiting list. My concern is, and I'm sure it's been mentioned before, is the reason most people go down the EHCP plan route is they feel it's a quicker route to get diagnosis or a quicker route to get help for the children, because otherwise you're either paying private for dyslexia assessments or you're waiting 2 years for other assessments. Do you still agree with that, or do you think it's more complicated than that? So I think that the reasons that families and other professionals would seek to pursue an education healthcare plan route is probably varied. I think timescales will play into that for assessments. The ability to get specialist provision will be part of it. There's a whole host of reasons why. We also see different times of the year and different transition points as being a pressure for education, health and care plan requests as well for assessments. So there's a whole range of issues mixed up within that decision making and request. I do think we've got a very strong network of SENCOs across Nottinghamshire, both within our maintained schools and our academy sector, and some really robust processes for supporting children, families, and making assessments at the earliest stage. And we continue to focus on that as well, to make sure that's as good as it can be. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Jim. Just to build on what Peter said, and to acknowledge your point, Councillor Lee, about the difficulties family faces when they go through the process of SEND. It can be quite difficult, particularly if it's the first time a family has accessed services. So through the SEND Improvement Board, we are employing SEND Education Pathway Officers. So there's 3 of those that are being employed currently, and they will offer one-to-one support for families to help navigate through the system, just to ensure that they get the care they require and when they need it, because it can be a bit of a minefield. So we've acknowledged that through the SEND Improvement Board, and we've taken action by employing 3 of these EPOs that are working one-to-one with families to navigate that system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. As you know, I'm Vice Chairman governance and ethics, and we regularly get fines due to not meeting that requirement. And what I am saying here is it time that we look at maybe other options and other things that we don't do to see if we can relieve the excess burden on EHCPs. If we look at dyslexia, if we look at other things, if we look at other help available that we may not do at the moment, would that not alleviate maybe some pressures that we're receiving in that area? I don't require a question today, it's just
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lee. I've got Councillor Creamer, Councillor Wilmot, and then I'll come to you, James. Councillor Creamer.
Thank you, Chair. Just two short ones. Paragraph 11, just for clarification there. Can you clarify the data? Because as of November, the children were taking over 200 days on the graphic set. So I've just clarified the data. And the second question, again, it's on data. And paragraph 29-30, two paragraphs just on data and working together. Incorporate, and the sentence, incorporating data sets from across the organisations. What data sets? Where? Now's that? It's just words. There's no indication of how they're working together. And it says data sets, but again, no data sets visible or explained.
Peter.
Thank you. In terms of data sets, there's a piece of work being undertaken by the local area partnership to bring together data held by the ICB and data held by the local authority into one dashboard. So we've got an overview of the SEND system across a holistic overview in terms of measuring performance and risk and challenge and the experience for children and families. So that's the data set that's being referred to. That's taken some time, both to identify the appropriate measures and to find ways of matching the data so that that held by one organisation, that held by another can form one data set. Colleagues across the ICB and the local authority have worked together to produce that. The improvement board, the SEND improvement board, in their meeting last week was able to see for the first time that data set coming together and what it looks like. So it's something which we could share with you to give you that overview. In fact, it'd be helpful to share with all committee members the draft data set that is being held across the SEND improvement activity, and it will feed into this. I think one of the things we're conscious of is that the reporting here to Select Committee sits alongside all those other elements of reporting on this. So we're trying to make sure that we pull that together into one cohesive report, really. So we'll begin to include that within that. Thank you.
Councillor Creed.
Yeah, just thank you for that. Yes, that would be us understand what data set without knowing the XYZ, the scale of each data set and how they interweave. It's just words. So yes, it'll be very useful to have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Smith.
Sorry, Chairman, I couldn't let Councillor Lee's challenge go unanswered about EHCPs and the delay that's causing fines. I acknowledge that is the case. If you read the report, as of November, we've improved the time it's taking, and we've gone up 24%. We are now on 28.3% of children receiving the outcomes to those within the 20-week time frame. That is not enough, and there is far more work to do there, but that has gone up 24%, and we have employed additional 9, or are employing additional 9 education psychologists to help with those assessments. So we acknowledge that fines are an issue, particularly if it goes over the 20 weeks, but we're doing a lot of work, as you can see in the report, to try and mitigate those, and that work is ongoing.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. That's a question I'm going to come to shortly. Councillor Wilmot. John.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for allowing me to speak. Because I'm not normally on this committee, but I have read the report fully, which I always do. So I know some people don't, but otherwise, I'm a little bit alarmed to say the situation is that I've got a few observations to say, and of course a few questions. On the observation, I've also read last year's report, which was rather damning, to be honest with you. It looked really very poor. It showed widespread failings into the service that children with special educational needs and disabilities, at SEND of course, in Nottinghamshire received. It is timely to receive, and it is timely to receive this report this morning. Other councils have also experienced similar problems. Indeed, over the weekend, 3 senior councillors have resigned following a critical report into local special educational needs and disabilities sent in other councils. Suffolk County Council received similar criticisms, and their politicians did the honourable thing and stood down.
Councillor Wilmot, is there going to be a point
Yes,
relevant
coming up to it now,
Suffolk
Chairman,
County Council, please?
I just wondered, has anybody been brought to task on the issues of the failings over the past 12 months? I've not seen any report that says anybody's been brought to a position where they should be looking at whether they should be resigning or not. Paragraph 7 states that there's been a stock take on the 12th of January 2024. Could you please tell us the outcome of this and whether there is a continued improve in the waiting times for children having their needs assessed? That's question 1. Looking at page 13, it says that you need to ensure children and young people with SEND receive robust and consistent support through the EHS plans. Now, I know that some, because I know of a school near me, some are in mainstream education. Does each of the schools have the necessary specialist teachers to be able to give the child a chance in life? That's a real question that I'd like to ask. And children and young people with additional needs, but without an EHC plan, have their needs been identified, met and monitored? And how is it done? I just wondered how it was done. Looking at the page 15, the percentage of new EHC plans issued within timescales, I'm just looking at the graph, and it seems that although you've said that there's been an improvement, the graph shows that from January last year to December, there's been no improvement at all. It's exactly the same graph position. I just wondered if somebody could tell me what the reason for that is. And then I look at the average time to complete each stage of the EHC assessment process. Again, the graph shows that it's now exactly the same position as when it was in January of last year to December of this year. It's exactly the same. I just wondered why the assessments have dropped in that issue. And my final question is...
John, Councillor,
yeah,
can I just ask, is this the final point? Because I'm losing track of how many questions there are.
Yeah.
I don't know if people want to answer those first before we come on to the last one, or do you want to take the last one?
Pleasure.
Can I just say that, Councillor Wilmot, I really appreciate you coming today, and I have absolutely no doubt about your thoroughness, etc. That's one of the things that I do respect about you. But what we're not going to do in this committee is talk about whether it's members of this council or officers of this council that should be falling on swords or resigning. That's not a matter for us to be discussing today or any day, just like we wouldn't discuss it if it were members up to other activities where perhaps they fell short of some of the standards that we expect of members of this council or officers.
It was just an observation, Chairman. That,
okay, well, it's not an observation that I'm going to accept.
Okay.
Thank you. So, as far as the questions so far, Peter, is that something you want to lead with, or Councillor Smith?
Okay, so I'll try and cover as many as I can remember, and if you need to remind myself or others, please do. I think the first question was about the stock take with the local area partnership and the Department for Education that took place on the 12th of January. We obviously went through that process. We have a conversation at the end of that. It was, I think, from my perspective, a helpful opportunity to review where we are 6 months on with the improvement journey, with the support of the Department for Education as a critical partner in our improvement work. We won't know the outcome of that. It was a broadly positive meeting. Progress was noted, and they were able to pinpoint where that was most effective. But the DFE then needs to take that back to ministers internally following the stock take, and they pull that evidence together across both health colleagues, NHS England, and Department for Education colleagues. Discuss that with the minister, and then that will be fed back to Colin as the corporate director. That should take place at some point in February, towards the end of February, and that will then be reported to the SEND Improvement Board in March of this year, and it will then feed its way into the following update report to Select Committee. So it's not something I can give any more information on at the time because I simply haven't got that.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Councillor Wilmot, you had one further question, or do you want to come back on any of that?
So just in terms of some of the other questions, one was about do schools have the specialist teachers that they need? It's a combination really. All schools will have a SACRE to support with identifying and provision of needs for children with SEN. Do they have all the specialist support they need? It will be constrained by the budgets that are available to schools. There is additional funding through the high needs block, which is detailed, I think, or referenced in the report, and subject to other reports that colleagues will be cited on. There's also additional specialist teaching teams within the local authority and specialist services within the local authority that support schools in that identification and assessment of needs, including educational psychologists who have a proportion of their time still to support in developing the expertise and confidence of mainstream teachers and SENCOs, our specialist teaching teams from the SFSS and others who will all go on to support our school settings. In terms of the graphs, the percentage of new HC plans issued within timescale has increased over that time period. In fact, I think I could be confident in saying that in 2022, 4.2% of the plans were delivered within the statutory timescale of 20 weeks. And by December 2023, that was at 28%. And that trajectory is continuing upwards to meet national and then exceed it. And that will take time. This is against the backdrop of continued increased demand for education and healthcare assessments, which continues to make that a challenging situation. There will be times where that, on a graph, on a monthly basis, won't be consistently increased because some of those assessments delivered will be those that are out of timescale, and actually we need to measure that out over time to level that. Otherwise, if we focus solely on those that were new assessments to artificially increase our progress, it would have a detrimental impact on children who have been waiting for a longer period of time for those assessments. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Wilmot.
My final question on it. Just say that you approached 1,500 families who are receiving help at the present time, and you got 139 responses, which 75 responded positively. Do you see that as a positive situation, that only 139 out of 1,500 families, when you are actually helping these families a great deal? I just wondered why so many didn't respond.
Thank you. A number of reasons, I would think. There's a lot of surveys and survey activity with parents and carers. Parents and carers have the opportunity to feedback within their annual review processes when they meet annually to review an education, health and care plan. We're doing some work to capture the feedback from those sessions as well. So we've got contemporaneous feedback from families around the HC process. This piece of work around the 1,500 families was particularly to hear from those who already have an education, health and care plan that we might not otherwise hear from. We tend to hear, as a local authority, and many other councils will be in the same place, hear from parents and carers who have got some challenge, and we try and work and support them. But other parents and carers' voices won't be heard. So that piece of work was specifically to open that out and widen that feedback. It would be great if we had all families responding, because we really want to hear from all our parents and carers. What we are doing, though, through our revised governance arrangements, we've set up a partnership assurance and improvement group to hold accountability across the system. That has strong representation of parents and carers on it from different parts of Nottinghamshire, along with education settings, health care providers, and other leaders within the system collectively to have oversight of SEND. And that's met twice now. It's a new arrangement. It's replaced what previously was the SEND Accountability Board. The Partnership Assurance and Improvement Group has commissioned a survey of all parents within Nottinghamshire as part of an annual survey arrangement, which we approved in our January meeting, and that will be taken forward to hear even more feedback from parents and carers. We will make sure that the results of that are shared along with the action that's been taken across the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just to build on what Peter said, we have also launched a send improvement feedback inbox and that's been shared with families who are going through the process. So they don't have to wait for a survey. They can feedback through their caseworker. Every family is designated with one, but they can also feedback directly to the council through the inbox, which is monitored.
Thank you. Councillor Wilmot, anything else?
Issue about the mainstream education specialist teachers. You did say that some of the schools haven't got any specialist teachers because of money restraint. Is that what you said?
Oh, Peter. Councillor Wilmot, can you turn your mic off, please?
Yep, just point of correction. All schools will have a special educational needs coordinator within their schools.
But not an individual one. They'll be moving round. No, they've all got the actual.
Yeah, in terms of specialist support for children and young people, teaching assistants will be utilised within education settings as well to support, and they'll be used according to needs. And again, the school budget's and additional funding that's available to make the provisions required.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. Before I come to you, Jez, it might just be an appropriate point for me to just ask about the educational psychologists. You mentioned some recruitment in that area. Just wondered if you could just highlight some of the challenges that we've got in terms of recruitment and what are we doing about that, please. Thank you.
Education psychologists play a key role in the EHCP process. Recruiting them is like recruiting gold dust. It's extremely difficult. However, we have plans in place. We've got 3 additional trainees in the department at the moment, which are being trained up, and they will be fully qualified shortly and will contribute to that. And that will take our additional ed sites, 9 additional ed sites that we're recruiting. We also use agency staff at the moment to help with that are dedicated to the writing of EHCP plans, which is contributing to our increase in meeting the timescales, which is up by 24% this year. I'll hand over to
Thank you,
Peter for technical.
Yeah, thank you. Just to say that plan of recruitment that was approved is over a rolling period of time. So we are attracting new education psychologists into Nottinghamshire. It tends to be a lag, so some of the appointments that we're making now will actually not take effect until 2026 because we try and secure a grow your own through the trainee programme as well with the university. But we're doing all we can to increase capacity, and that's being supported by the authority, which is excellent. There is a national shortage. They are like hen's teeth. Other authorities around about us are struggling as well, but we are actively campaigning to increase our pool here within Nottinghamshire. Oh, in addition to that, we're using locum educational psychology capacity to increase our ability to undertake assessments of EHCs as well.
Peter, thank you. Thanks for the comprehensive feedback. James, you had a question. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. You asked the question. One of the questions I was going to ask was about EP capacity. It is really important, not just for EHCP, but for the proactive early intervention work, that we have a really strong and full team of educational psychologists. So one of the questions I was going to ask was, do you know how many additional qualified educational psychologists we will have in September of 2024 this year to support the work in schools and wider?
That's something I'll need to check with the service because of the recruitment programme, but I can get that back to yourself. Thank you, James. But just on that point, I think completely agree with you around the benefit that not just statutory work for education psychologists takes place, but actually it speaks to some of the questions that have come through committee already. Actually, the additional role of educational psychologists to build an inclusive system, to provide assessment within mainstream settings, and to provide that support around the skills and expertise of mainstream SENCOs and teachers is critically important in managing and supporting children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities at all stages, and not just relying on an education, health and care plan to do that. So it's crucial that we keep that investment in our EP service working with schools and settings.
Thank you. And I was going to give some feedback from schools. I spend a lot of time with head teachers and SENCOs in schools across the county and in other local authorities. And they are noticing the improved timelines. They feel there's still a lot more to be done, but they're very grateful for the work that goes on. They understand that this is an inherited and a very, very long-standing issue that isn't linked to anything recent, really. Question then about outcome 3 under priority action 1, which is to do with those without an EHCP and those children then having their needs identified and met. Feedback from schools is that the near crisis level is in 2 phases. There's those who need an EHCP but are struggling to get it, and those that have additional needs for whom there is not adequate additional funding to support them. And there are teaching assistants, SENCOs in schools with the skills, but they haven't got the capacity to do that. And there isn't as much detail on that. I noted a 20% uplift in higher needs funding. My colleagues would say it's very difficult to access that funding. The bidding process is too complicated and far too involved, and actually they spend a lot of time writing bids rather than supporting young people who need that support in the class.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and thanks, James, for those observations. I'm new to this role, but I've been out to see schools across the county, particularly one with high needs in their mainstream setting. There are some funding streams and the processes are set out by DFE, as you'll know, but others are local processes, particularly the bidding for HLN funding into the family SENCOs and how those are reviewed. What we are doing at the moment, we're trialling giving more funding, HLM funding, to families of schools that have what we call, there's a better term for this, if you can come up with it, let me know, magnet schools for children with SEND or who aren't diagnosed with SEND but require additional support. What we are trialling at the moment in one particular family of schools across the county is allocating more funding to that family of schools for them to bid into than we would in other areas where need isn't as great. That's trialling at the moment. Those information and how that trial goes will come to me as the cabinet member for SEND to review how that's gone and then look to roll that out across the county in September. So from September we may have a circumstance where a particular family of schools have higher funding than others because they've got more need and they can bid into that. What we're also doing as well, which you'll be aware of, difficulties where children transition from nursery settings or preschool settings into infant schools, particularly standalone infant schools. Then they have to start the process all over again, as you've outlined, and then by the time they get the funding, the child's out the door into junior school or into a different setting. That is difficult. So what we're doing as part of the trial as well is to see whether we can, because that's a local policy, to see whether we can amend that policy. So if you get funding in a nursery setting, that child will then transition with that funding into infants or primary settings as well. We hope to be able to implement that in September, and that's something I'm working very hard with Peter. He's sick of me asking for updates on how that's going. So we are looking to address those particular concerns that you've highlighted.
Peter, if you have to be quick.
Thank you, Chair. And it's just to acknowledge the frustration that bidding processes and for funding have, and the fact that it does take time. Part of that is to make sure it's fair and equitably distributed, and make sure that within areas it's moderated effectively. I think that, I know that our principal education psychologist is seeking to review further the mechanisms that we use for that bidding process, because anything we can do to make it easier for education settings to say this is the need that we have, how can we meet it, and then for that to be moderated effectively to distribute funding would be well received. I think the other thing is that last year we increased, as a local authority, the amount of funding available through our AFN, our Family Network Funding, Area Network Funding, and our high level needs funding for schools and settings, to try and get more money right where it's needed in terms of resource to meet needs. What we need to do next is to review the bandings targeted to the need better. And that's a piece of work that's underway for the high needs budget for next year.
Thank you, Peter. James, okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. There's never enough money for children with special educational needs and disabilities. So we've got to target what we have in the right way as efficiently as we can, because teachers are screaming out for the resource to support them because they've got other children without SEND in their class as well. So we appreciate the efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I'm going to take one final contribution from Councillor Pringle.
It's a nice contribution, Chairman. I'm sure you'll be pleased with me. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Smith to a question, but I want to recognise Peter, the improvement and assurance group, really positive. I'm sure that they can look at funding streams which make it a smoother route for those who are in need, because they tend to be in need immediately, and so the response tends to be really impactful. We all know that. I'm not saying anything we don't know. So good luck with that. I was a little bit sickened when we were talking about 2026. I've got to say, if we go back to 2022 with a 4.5% reactive then or not reactive, anyway, I'm sure the outcome will be positive. I'm not looking for answers, to be honest. Councillor Smith, on the HCP delivery, two things, and this probably comes back to Peter actually with the improvement and assurance group. How many people actually apply and aren't accepted for HCP plans? But more importantly, or as importantly, how many people are offered an HCP plan that then have difficulty? And I'm sure they will be speaking to this assurance group that you're talking about, Peter. I'd love at some point for some data to come back on the responses from both of those, if that's possible. So perhaps something for the working timetable later on. I'm not asking for specifics now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Do you want to come back on that?
Just to say that we're happy to share the data set that's coming to the Partnership Assurance Improvement Group. So there's a SEND system-wide data which we'll share, but we're in the process of developing a new data set for the Partnership Assurance Improvement Group to focus exactly on some of those areas. We've got access to that data already. We can share that, but more than happy that comes out. In fact, I'm confident that the Partnership Assurance and Improvement Group, or the page to make it easier, will have a website hosted on the council's website, which we can send a link to, which should have all the minutes and documentation for each meeting as well. So happy that is shared with colleagues of this committee.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Councillor Taylor, you just want to comment on that?
Thank you. It was actually on the 2026 question, and I wanted to just test what we were talking about. I think you were maybe talking about the period by which we will have recruited more ed psychs. Am I right? So I think sometimes we don't necessarily express ourselves clearly. It isn't that there is not a will to recruit sooner and faster, but there are different routes to recruiting. And in the way that you would recognise with, let's say, a medical student going through their study years and then their time in different posts, there is a need for the ed psych not only to have their initial degree, but then to go through various on-the-job periods. And with the ed psychs, that's lengthy. I think it's something like 3 years. So when Peter was talking about having complement of ed psychs up, it's because we've got a three-strand approach. So if we have got ready qualified ed psychs, and we can recruit them and tempt them to come and work here sooner than later, that's one. And then there are the elements of supporting ed psychs who've got their first degree to get through the different stages. So the 2026 is because some of the people who have to do work placements and things, and who would have maybe been looking to us or other councils to secure those placements, will never be qualified until 25, 26, whatever it might be. So what we've done is sought to enhance our offer so that the people do come and do those work placements with us, We can't use literally a golden handcuff, but by offering them that support, that they will then be the qualified ed psychs by the time they are qualified who stay with us. So I don't know if that helps, just use slightly different language. It's about getting people at different phases and encouraging them to be with us and stay with us because of where they are in their education journey, their qualification journey.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Pringle.
It does, Councillor Taylor, but we are still going to be down these head psychs until 2026. So I'm assuming if we recognise that, I'll come back then when
Just it probably speaks to the question earlier on that I said I would follow up outside and come back to you on around the recruitment. So for September 24 there'll be an additional 0.6 FTE educational psychology joining the service. We're currently managing a significant locum EP capacity as well to support with that during this process. We've got 3 additional educational psychologists starting in September 2025 with us full-time, permanent, and we're going out to further recruitment in March of this year. So although we've got that permission to recruit 6, we're not kind of waiting 3 years down the line. We are continually trying to expand on that, as well as securing those educational psychologists who come in as trainee EPs, and we've increased the number of trainee EPs that we support from universities, or you bid for them. It's a bit like a bidding process, trying to increase the capacity within Nottinghamshire.
Councillor Pringle.
So you tricked me. Yeah, you mentioned 2026 as a point in time whereby we would not necessarily have the cover that we would like up until that date. Now you're now telling me that we will have the cover, although there won't be specific full-time head sites. Is that right? Sorry.
I don't know where the 2026 numbers, dates has come from, so apologies for that. By 2025, we should have 9 additional full-time equivalent EPs and 3 additional trainee ones, which Peter was just alluding to earlier. We have to bid for the trainee ones from the university, unlike a graduation scheme, but that's what we're doing. By 2025, 9 additional FTE.
Chair,
Okay. Councillor Crean, is it quick?
Yeah, very, very quick question, because it was brought up about the education period and the qualification period. Within the contract, after qualification, are they tied into a period of staying with us, or could they be headhunted immediately after qualification? Simple as that.
Does anyone want to take that on? But I think
I'll take.
I can't remember the time frames. I don't know if Peter's got them available, but when we were talking to the DFE in one of the SEND improvement boards, probably about 6 months, he gave us the welcome news that there is a longer lock-in. So we can't literally golden handcuff people into their employment. That's not legal. Otherwise, I wouldn't let anybody ever resign or retire. But there is a lock-in when they have enjoyed their post-degree supported work experience with us, and they get paid for that. And there is a lock-in. I just can't remember what the period is. So they can't literally walk out on day one, but sadly we can't keep them forever. But there's a glimmer of positivity.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. What I will say is, since joining this committee as chairman and speaking with the different officers and members, just as there are in many areas of the council and municipal organisations, there's lots of challenges. I've certainly seen the absolute depth of multifaceted and diverse challenges, and the response that I've seen and the commitment that I've seen from our officers in particular has been astonishing. So I think we're well placed with what we've got to try and move forward. I think we recognise that there are things to improve, as there are in all organisations, but I've been very pleased with what I've seen up to yet. So thank you. I'm now going to ask Martin to read out any further recommendations that has arisen from this discussion, and thank you all for your contributions.
So just the one, in addition to the one that's already been moved and second. So the third one is that further information on the funding and delivery of the jointly commissioned sensory therapy service be circulated to the members of the Children and Families Select Committee.
Thank you, Martin. I'm going to move that additional recommendation. I'd like a second.
Chair, sorry, are we having a data update?
Chairman, a second. Yeah, I'm not sure if that needs to be a recommendation or not, but I'm happy to have the data sets emailed around all members of the committee.
Okay, so we're going to take a vote on the additional recommendation and the original recommendation. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands. All those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? So that's unanimous. Thank you all very much. Agenda item number 6, early years and childcare sector in Nottinghamshire. So I invite Councillor Tracy Taylor, Cabinet Member for Children and Families, to introduce this report. Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. We do receive reports on childcare sufficiency at regular intervals. There is an obligation on this council to undertake that work, I think, annually. This particular report is focusing on the likely additional sufficiency needs because of the recent childcare reforms. So the rollout, or the intention of government, that childcare should be rolled out to children of working parents between the ages of 9 months and 5 years. So that's a huge expansion on what's been available previously. You do have the report in front of you. I think it's comprehensive, and I thank officers for the work that has gone into this. It does conclude that we do not face immediate sufficiency challenges. There will always be some locality challenges because you may have an excess in one place which is balanced by a deficit elsewhere, because geography does that. But I think the easiest way to actually look through this now is just to take questions from panel members, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I do that, I'm going to move the recommendations on page 32 and seek a seconder.
Chairman, I second.
Thank you. So I'm now going to open for questions from the floor for debate. Thank you. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. I think Councillor Taylor has part answered some of this, because I was going to say, what is provision like in Nottinghamshire? Because I certainly know in Mansfield, lots of nurseries have closed. Also, because of the cost of living rise and the minimum wage rise as well, private day sectors can't keep up with employing staff. So there definitely will be a shortfall in our area. And looking at parents partly funding the wraparound care in schools and then footing the bill. Again, I'm coming to my area. We've got lots of deprivation, and so for parents and carers to pay for wraparound, we're going to have some areas that will be able to afford it, some areas that won't. Again, lots of our schools have academised, so I can't see the academies paying for that either. So, going out to private companies to get that early child care in and wraparound services, I think there will be deficits in some areas of our county.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Councillor Callaghan. I think it's important to recognise they are two completely distinct services, areas of childcare. And the report itself does note that there has been misunderstanding about government's intentions for the wraparound care. There has never been a suggestion that that would be funded care. It was always intended that it was a facility available for parents should they choose to take it up, but that it would be at their cost. So there is some misunderstanding that maybe makes people think they're not getting what free facility they thought they would, but it was never intended as a free facility. I'll leave it to officers in a moment to maybe just speak about what we know of the wraparound provision that we've got already and what the likely rollout will be in respect of needs. Bear in mind, not every family wants or needs wraparound care in any event. The school where I'm a governor, we have both breakfast and after school clubs. Parents pay because we have staff to pay when they're present, but 6 might go on a Wednesday, 12 might go on a Friday. It's variable and it's according to parental choice. The other question about sufficiency in knots, I will ask officers to answer. Irene's with us here today because there has been a lot of work gone into this report to identify not only sufficiency across the county but sufficiency by geography. And the report does also recognise some of those challenges that you've articulated. So whether the funding streams are sufficient to cover, whether the fact that there'll be a bit of what I call a seesaw, with parents getting the funded entitlement now instead of a privately paid entitlement. In the past, some nurseries have used the privately paid entitlement to underwrite and subsidise the costs for the free places. So there is a bit of a tip and tilt there. And they are some of the challenges that I think are already recognised in the report. But I will ask officers just, Irene, if you wouldn't mind commenting specifically on the Mansfield area and how we're assessing sufficiency there.
I'm actually going to pass that over to Mandy Stratford, who's our early years strategic manager, who lives and breathes childcare sufficiency.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chair. Pleasure.
Great. Yes, I mean, as we've specified in the report and in the CSA itself, there were 8 areas that came out with having less than 10% places available, specifically to address the issue around the Mansfield, Councillor Callaghan. We've been looking at Mansfield in depth for some time. We've had a number of childcare providers that have operated out of some of our children's centres in Mansfield with the hope of attracting some of our more vulnerable children, but the take-up of those places is poor, and it makes the childcare unsustainable. So we have a balance to make sure that we are able to provide those places for the children that need it the most, but also make sure that we're not setting childcare providers up to fail in those areas. So Mansfield is constantly on our radar. Some of the work that we've been doing really recently is with our children's centre colleagues, is what support those families and those children can access if they're not accessing childcare. So those children are not being missed. So I hope that answers that question for you.
Thank you. Councillor Keller.
No, thank you.
Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you very much, Chair. As I say, I welcome this report. There's no doubt that free childcare is a huge benefit to the community, the working families all over the area. The government have stated that it will oversee, in their words, the biggest ever expansion of free childcare. Parents and nurseries across the county and the country have expressed concern about a serious situation approaching in just 2 months' time. This will be when all 2-year-olds will be eligible for 15 hours funded childcare for 38 weeks per year. The Prime Minister has already admitted that practical issues have hampered the delivery of the free childcare offer. However, there are also warnings that a significant bigger problem looms in September when 9-month-olds will be eligible for the scheme. The report seems to gloss over any potential issues, although it does mention some additional wraparound funding for children with special educational needs and disabilities in paragraph 40C. Do you feel that the expansion of free childcare will protect children who need care the most? With the problems with the expansion, how now being openly discussed at the highest level, are you confident that childcare providers in Nottinghamshire will be able to meet the additional needs? And finally, on page 31, item 40, it says that local authorities have been allocated short-term funding under the 4 headings of early years entitlement entitlement delivery support funding, wraparound capacity funding, wraparound programme funding, and childcare expansion capital funding. I just wondered, have you got a plan B if the short-term funding doesn't continue? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Who wants to take that on?
And I'll start from the back end, as it were. It's not a question of having a plan A and a plan B, Councillor Wilmot. As is often the case when governments of all persuasions announce plans, local authorities are required to shape and implement those plans. The work that's undertaken is often funded with a very short-term funding stream to get it off the ground. So you're quite right, paragraph 40 does recognise and makes the very clear point that this is all, if you like, start-up money, seed money, in order to undertake the work to get it going. And it acknowledges then in paragraph 41, the obligation on local authority, statutory duty for us to provide certain information. So I don't think there's any ducking from what is very clear within the whole financial implications section, that depending on what government chooses to do and depending on what government chooses to fund, there may be an ongoing cost to this authority to continue to supervise and deliver these extra facilities in terms of our sufficiency. That's not unusual. I mean, I'll get my language wrong. Officers may correct me. I think there's something about the additional burdens doctrine. So it's a doctrine that exists. We don't necessarily see it willingly and swiftly offered, but where there is an extra burden, as we typically do, we will continue to carry that burden, and we may or may not see funding for it. It could be that once this is up and running, that those set-up costs are no longer required, and therefore it's not an issue. With the other questions, I think it comes back similarly to Councillor Callahan's question. There are two distinct threads. One is wraparound care, and the other is about the free childcare. And I think the report does break down through several tables the timelines. Page 24 of your whole pack, at paragraph 9, gives the timelines. But I think that the report does, and again I'll hand it back over to officers in a moment, I think the report does clarify that on the measures that we have made, that those timelines can be met. So I don't think there's a looming crisis in April this year for the 2-year-old places.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Wilmot.
Yeah, finally, you did say about Mansfield that whether there were any problems with providers and places and so forth. I just wondered if you could explain to us about Ashfield, what the position is. Have we got enough providers in Ashfield, and will there be enough places?
Thank you. I'll hand the timelines and crisis or not sufficiency and the Ashfield question to officers.
Thank you. I'm not going to pass this quite to Mandy yet. You'll be pleased to know, Mandy. Yeah, we appreciate there are some concerns, and it's certainly a concern nationally that the early years sector won't necessarily be ready for these changes. The biggest thing to say around the childcare reforms is actually these are working families. It's only working families that are eligible for this new childcare extension. A lot of children in those working family households are already accessing childcare that family is paying for. So certainly in the first few years, we know that there is sufficient childcare provision. Where we have challenges is places for babies, for children from 9 months. So in some areas, so where we're relying on schools, for example, to provide childcare, it's very unlikely they will lower their age range to include babies. We're relying very heavily there on the private sector, independent sector, childminders and preschools. They're absolutely critical to this. And at the moment, they're really up for the challenge, to be honest. There are some, as Councillor Taylor said, where they are using private fees to help subsidise the rest of their funding. The funding rates that we give them are the most generous we possibly could in Nottinghamshire. We are allocated funding through the Dedicated Schools grant. there's an allocation in there for early years, and councils can retain up to 5% of that. Next year that will change to 3%. We have never, we've only ever retained less than 3% in Nottinghamshire. And that funding is for the early years staff, the cohort that we have to develop and deliver the services that we need to, and that funding will go on. So when this short-term funding is finished, there will still be an early years team. We just won't necessarily have extra staff around wraparound, for example. So it's those sorts of things that we want to think about when we talk about sustainability. Now I'm going to hand over to Mandy to talk about Ashfield.
Thank you. Yes, we've looked at all of the different ward areas across the county for our CSA last year. It's worth noting that the childcare sufficiency assessment is only ever a snapshot in time. Ashfield, I can tell you at the moment, presents no concerns as far as sustainability and sufficiency of childcare, apart from the potential for a closure in Hucknall, which we're looking at the moment, which is very recent. But we are likely to be able to replace that provider. We're quite confident there won't be an issue with Ashfield.
Thank you. Councillor Wilmot, are you finished? Yeah. Thank you very much. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. As we've seen with the Labour and City Council, we know they're in a bit of financial bother at the moment, and they've announced redundancies and service cuts. My question is are we expecting extra burden to this council, especially in these services, of where Labour may need, the Labour and City Council may struggle to provide services? I know in libraries we're expecting maybe more people use our services. Do we expect in this area that this might happen?
I will hand over to officers, because you would have seen at one area of the report when we're talking about sufficiency, it was quite an absurd statistic that we're at 105% capacity, which sounds like a bizarre measure. How can you ever be at 105? It can only be 100 surely. And that's because some parents who are using childcare facilities are using facilities in the county area. Maybe that's where they're working, whatever it might be. So we assess the sufficiency based on the population that we have and the child population that we have. But some of our parents might be using facilities elsewhere, and some parents from elsewhere might be using ours. So there are some absurdities. The obligation on us is to provide a sufficiency, to seek to provide and support sufficiency for our population. But none of us live in a vacuum, whether it's childcare services. So I accept the challenge. I think the short answer, the easy answer is we don't know. In the way that we have an obligation for provision for our population, the city also has an obligation for it. So it depends what kind of childcare you're talking about. And some of the facilities that the city might be closing are not necessarily the facilities that will be delivering this. We don't run our nursery provision, our childcare provision. I can only assume that within the city geography, similarly the city council didn't run them. It is private and charitable providers who do that. So I don't see an obvious necessary correlation. But yes, we are mindful of and sympathetic towards the situation that our neighbours in the city are currently facing. I will just ask officers for sort of a more technical assessment comment in terms of capacity.
Thank you. I mean, as I've said before, the funding, the vast majority of funding for the core early years team within the county council is funded through the dedicated schools grant. It's the same for the city, so they can retain a small amount for their team, and then the funding goes out. And as Councillor Taylor said already, we don't deliver our own childcare provision. The only council-led provision is through maintained primary schools who have nurseries. That's the only sort of way. So their funding will continue as well. So we don't have any particular risks around this. The early childhood services world is local authority funding in terms of the children's centre service, but the rest of it is pretty much externally funded. So I think we're in a good place.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, just quickly, I think it's been answered to some extent, but an observation or a request. I would like to ask about how it's going to get, but I think everybody in here would be asked, but is it possible at some time in the future to actually have the districts of area of concern rather than go through each one individually today? And just on page 6, the capacity in F, it says with no functions with the Nottingham County Council, and the Pathfinder fund is temporary, so may be withdrawn. Just a question on that, which I think I might have got the answer to, is will that suddenly be withdrawn, or will it be phased out where it's provided? So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work when the Pathfinder funding has come in. Will it suddenly be right, you've got it till September the 1st, or you've got this till September the 1st, this till November, etc.? Not quite sure. Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Who's going to take that? Is that you, Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, sorry, I was struggling because I was looking on the wrong page. I was looking at paragraph 6. So, typically with things like the Pathfinders, and again, I'll get clarification from officers, but when the Pathfinder funding is set up, you know it is for a 6-month, 12-month, or 3-year trial. So, in the context of it being phased out, my understanding is, having secured it, we'll already know how long a period it's supposed to address, and therefore we will know when it's ending. But again, I'll look to officers just to confirm whether I've read my notes properly.
Oh yeah, I can pick that one up. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. So we know the amounts of funding that we've got now for the next 2.5 years. So, and that is going to be done on a block basis, on a tapered basis. So it won't just stop. However, we know that the end of the funding that we will get will be March 2026. Nottinghamshire were part of the pilot for the wraparound Pathfinder. So we've been really lucky that we got some of our information early. So the only one that's a lump sum is the capital investment, and that is a finite pot. The rest tapers over the next 2 years.
Thank you. What I will say is that as members, we've all got our own divisions where we may have some questions, and we're perfectly all able, whether it's our division or our districts or boroughs, or even from groups, we can talk to the officers individually or from a group and ask some of these questions if they're very specific. Thank you. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to respond to Councillor Lee, who raises a good question. In May, the expanse of a potential failure could fall upon us from a wider area. So I'm hoping that we're not only aware of that, but we're settled in being able to handle that. So thank you for that. 2 questions. One, I think I'm not sure is the right question to answer. I want to ask the one I think I can ask pertinently. In paragraph 22, support for SEND children. The last sentence really, this is naturally assumed, this is obviously talking about the impact of early years and the fact that we understand there'll be a greater demand, which we all recognise that. An increased demand for supplementary funding, is that something that we're aware of now, and is the pathway to that for those families something, is it? It's just and the impact on our school early years provision, is that impacted by holidays at all? That's something I never thought about until we spoke today. And I would like just to point out, Chairman, as well, Irene could play for any of the Six Nations teams the way she's offloaded that ball twice this morning to Mandy.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I'm understanding the question correctly.
Or should I just ask Irene?
No, I'm all right with this one, I think. We already explained when we're looking at the SEND item how the funding comes through, but I think it's important to recognise that the childcare provision and indeed SEND provision is term time only. So the funding is intended to be 39 out of 52 weeks because that's how it's defined. So I wouldn't expect that SEND children would be getting less because, whether they're in a private setting or in a school setting, because the delivery for both childcare and the legislation around it, both childcare and SEND provision, is predicated on 39 weeks a year delivery. So that's true in both cases.
So in recognising the demand's going to be covered. We're hopeful that the demand will be covered by the support that's already in place.
And I would say that speaks to what Councillor Smith was explaining earlier when he was talking about the fact that if you've gone for extra funding while you're in a nursery setting, then you have to go back around the loop again to try and start it all over when you go to primary school. So there's something about him trying to work towards a smoother process and funding going through. I think the other important point I'd make, and it's something Councillor Smith and I have spoken about, he'll speak for himself in a minute, it's very important to me that we don't distill all needs down to that acronym SEND, because many children have additional needs. They don't necessarily have SEND. And I'm not, and I know it might sound like semantics, but some children need additional support at a point in time or a period in time, and that could be at the nursery setting to actually get them school ready in a different way. And we've talked in different places about whether it's speech and language, just being school ready. So I think it's really important that we recognise the difference between additional needs and don't channel all our thinking down into SEND, because not every child who has extra support for additional needs at one point in their life needs to be on an EHCP and SEND pathway for the rest of their life. So it's getting the money in the right place at the right time, picking up what Sam's spoken about in terms of a continuum of funding and support as long as it's needed.
Chairman, if I can, just to put that, I completely applaud what you're saying, because I think we're all in the same boat and we all recognise that. I've got family, daughters that work in difficult situations, teaching these children that need that little bit of extra care. I know exactly what you're talking about, but it is a section called SEND within the paper, and that's why I referred to that.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Thank you, Councillor Taylor, for not using a handoff and always giving us a detailed and comprehensive set of feedback. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just to build on what Councillor Taylor said, I think you're quite right. I think what that sentence doesn't actually explain is there is an increased trend nationally in SEND requirements and funding to match those increases in demand. And if it's not highlighted at early year and in nursery settings, it will be highlighted once they get into the primary phase anyway. We're just through the fact that more people, children younger, will be accessing education, i.e. through early year settings. We're going to highlight that earlier. There's a lot of work that the educational psychology team are doing through Aula to engage with early year settings, to train them up and their staff up on how to highlight those needs, but also take that family then through the process of accessing the support they require. And as I referenced earlier, we're looking to amend the funding streams so that if they do get funding through the HLN or AFN funding streams allocated to them at nursery setting, at the moment that doesn't transition with that child into primary settings, so then the primary school will have to start again. That's a local decision rather than a national decision, so we're looking at amending that from September onwards to increase that. But so just to the point about increased demand, I just think it's about recognising that demand early, because it would exist nationally. It's increasing, but we'd normally highlight it at primary, but now we can highlight it earlier, and that's why that sentence is there.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I've got just one question. With the rollout of the 15 hours for 2-year-olds, I'm being relatively new to the committee. I don't know how many times I'll be able to say that, but I just wonder whether it might be advantageous to have a briefing document or some briefing notes just for committee members, so that we've got some clarity of the county council's position and uniformity in the language that's being used, just so that we're all clear as a committee and not interpreting things differently. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to ask Martin if we have any further recommendations.
Yeah, so just to formalise that slightly. So firstly, the briefing that we circulated to members of the Children and Family Select Committee after the introduction of the 15 hours for 2-year-olds of working parents, so that will be after April 2024. And then secondly, the further report on the activity around the rollout of the new childcare reforms be considered at the January 2025 meeting of the Children and Families Select Committee.
Okay, so I'm going to move those additional recommendations. If I can have a second, please.
Second, John.
And now I'm going to put it to the vote for the additional recommendations and the original recommendations. So can I have a show of hands? 4. Thank you. That's unanimous. So, agenda item number 7, Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education Annual Reports. So I'm going to invite Peter again, please, if you can introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll be relatively brief in introducing the reports, but the Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education, which every local authority area must have, has an expectation and duty to publish an annual report annually. Previously, the annual report in Nottinghamshire went to the Children and Young People's Committee. Since the changeover, the report hasn't worked through the system, so it's now coming here. So we've got 2 years annual reports for review, and by committee today, we've got the 2021-22 report and the 2022-23 report. The purpose of the annual report is to provide an update on the work of SACRE within a local area, any movement around the agreed syllabus and other activity that's been undertaken, and then that should be published on the SACRE website. Normally, we would expect an annual report to be signed off by December and then published in the new year. So we're a little bit out of timescale on this one. So we're kind of scooping up the 2 annual reports, bringing them here for consideration and noting before they are approved for publication. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, thank you. So I'm going to move the recommendation on page 35 and I seek a seconder, please.
Chairman, second.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to open up to the floor for questions or debate. Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you very much.
Can we not have 5 questions if you've got a number of them? Can we let the officers and
I mean, my main thought of the situation, having been involved with this organisation, not myself, it can possibly do a wonderful job. But I'm very, very looking at the 3 meetings that I've had. What concerns me most of all is the percentage of people that weren't there. It's somewhere or other we've got to make sure that if an organisation is working with this council, that people are involved in it, and it's a pretty poor situation when you get over half the people not attending. But can I first of all say, churches should be more involved with council decisions, because churches have so many people, families, etc., that actually, if they were more involved, we should get more people knowing what's happening through decisions that are made. I mean, most churches now have an officer that looks after children and young people. In my area in Hucknall, 4 or 5 denominations have actually got children and young people officers that take all the children out of the mainstream service and so learn other things. And it's a great opportunity. I think we're missing in not involving the churches further, so that early intervention schemes can be brought in, so that children, young people are get educated, so that crime leaves us and the system improves. Because we have got to do something about children and young people at the present time. We've got to educate them at an earlier age to make sure that they get the opportunities that are available to them as well. Because if they don't get the opportunities, then they look for other things, and they join in groups and start doing things that we all know about. So all I can say is that we need to make sure that people come to these meetings and make it a worthwhile proposition. But also, I do feel that the religious education is very, very important, and some of it is not only important, but it's essential to educate children into less crime than is happening at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot, and I'll concur with you on attendance of meetings, and I'm really pleased that you're now on one of my other committees where we regularly see people that don't turn up, so it's good to have someone like you that I know will. Thank you very much for your comments. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Taylor sits on this board, so I'm going to pass to her for details to your answers. Just on church involvement, if I may address that first, the diocesan have a rep on this committee in James who is involved with church schools, so it's good to have that voice on this committee. And I know churches do a lot. In my division, I have churches that do a lot, and their work can be supported, outreach work can be supported through parish councils. And as councillors, we have CDF funds, so if churches come forward with particular projects that need a little bit of funding, we can help do that. So there are things that councillors in their own divisions can do in support of the church. I did pick up when I read the report about a few meetings not being quorate, but again, Councillor Taylor sits on it, so I will pass to her for the technical detail.
So kind. Thank you. I think it's important just to register what this report is about. SACRE, its main function is to advise the local authority on matters related to religious education and collective worship in schools, and in so doing, and the work that goes on, it is to help schools, because of course we now know in a semi-academised system schools don't all belong to the local authority. It is to help schools deliver a broad and rich multi-denominational RE curriculum. James is nodding gently, so I don't think I've gone too far awry with that. As Sam says, we do have the benefit of James on this committee. We also have Nigel as a standing member. He's simply not with us today. I understand the frustration at attendance or non-attendance. It's difficult because people are attending up and down the county. You'll see from the meetings that are listed that they had in the far north of Bassetlaw, they had down in the city. It is simply an unfortunate fact that some people struggle to get to some locations. That can be because of the journey and the distance. That can be because something else happened to come up on that particular day. So if I were to look at the meeting that we had some time ago at the Well, the Baptist Church in Retford, that is the most fantastic facility. That meeting was not helped at all by the fact that there was a foot of snow outside that day, and to ask people to travel. So I completely share your frustrations, and we would like to see more engagement. We've also had a change of secretary in SACRE over the last 2 years. So a long-standing secretary had retired. We then had a slight hiatus until Sally MacDonald, the current secretary, was recruited. And I think there's something about changes in personality. You need to allow somebody into a role to build the relationships with the members of the SACRE community. So Sally's come into a job learning and has built those relationships now. I'm fairly confident, as one of the 3 County Council SACRE representatives, that we will see higher engagement by virtue of those relationships having been re-established. And and that's not a criticism of anybody. That's a simple fact in life. When people change roles, you need to rebuild the networks and the relationships. Sally's done that, I would say, with a vengeance, and we do have strong relationships. The other point to make is that we also have very strong commitment from the faith groups who are represented at SACRE and from their members It's just that sometimes you can't be there. It can hamper the work a little bit, but I would say it's not for the want of commitment and good intent on the part of all of those who are involved.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. John, you want to come back?
Thank you. It is essential. I mean, the expertise that some of these churches have got is unbelievable. The ones that I see, and I know it's important that we really get to know what their thoughts are in lots of things as far as children and young people are concerned. But I do want to know what we're going to do to improve the attendance. I mean, you could ask for a written report. To make sure that they're on board with what's going off. You could send a substitute. There's so many things you can do, but it's not done at the moment. So I just wondered if it can possibly be put down that we try to improve the attendance levels at these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peter.
So I'm not a member of SACRE. I'm happy to feedback to the Secretary for SACRE the feeling from the committee that encouraging attendance and the value that the committee places in the role that SACRE play was noticed and identified and acknowledged, and that we're really keen to ensure that the chair, the Secretary of SACRE and the chair of SACRE know that we would put our support behind seeking to improve and continue to increase attendance at the meetings, given the value of the role that it plays.
Peter, that would be very welcome. Thank you. James.
Thank you, Chair. Just to comment that the work of SACRE is very much appreciated, certainly in the church sector, but I know from colleagues outside the church sector that they do appreciate the value of RE and what it brings to children's wider development. Question I have is whether SACRE goes into the detail around GCSE entries. Obviously, teaching RE is statutory across Key Stage 4. What some schools do is then turn that into a GCSE and deliver on far less curriculum time, guided learning hours than other subjects, which can detract from the overall purpose of the statutory requirement to teach RE. And it forces them through a GCSE to get an extra GCSE because they had to teach it anyway, often at less than 50% of the curriculum time other subjects would get. And I know that's a very technical question, but it is something that frustrates us. If Nigel were here, I'm sure he'd agree. We commit to 10% of the curriculum time, so they get more time in RE than other subjects. I don't think it's the same across all schools.
Thank you, James. Does anybody want to feedback on that?
I'll start, and Peter may want to comment. It's a really hard one. You'll be aware, James, we see a lot of schools where it is amongst a raft of humanities and students will choose to take it up or not. And my understanding is it's not a statutory requirement to teach RE all the way through to year 11. So it can fall by the wayside. My children went to a school where you could get half a GCSE, which I think probably absolutely makes your point about the value put upon it. I think maybe, and I don't know how we do it, Peter, there's possibly a conversation to be had with our multi-academy trusts about their approach to it, because I treat it as one amongst equals in the humanities sphere, and I mean I'm a governor at a church school, and you know I am a person of faith, so I hold it very dear at a personal level. I think we do have challenges in the schools, and I guess we might want to test, Peter, if that's at all possible, how our multi-academy trusts and our schools actually regard it and the value of it, because in the context of philosophy, which is less commonly taught, I think it's a very sound subject for students to be actually taking, particularly in the current days.
think my response would be that it might be an area of interest for SACRE to commission a piece of work around to better understand, since SACRE is holding the record of the GCSE results for that. Certainly, secondary academies will consult with and do consult with parents and carers on changes to their curriculum at times. And I know that in the last couple of years, I've one secondary academy who considered making an RE GCSE part of the compulsory curriculum through their tutor time, and actually determined not to do that and to keep it as a discrete subject and teach it in that way instead, and have it as an option. So there's different approaches. It might be of interest for, I think, SACRE as a piece of activity that could be commissioned out.
Thank you, Peter. That makes sense. I mean, across the group, do you think that's a positive way forward, that we talk to SACRE and ask them to commission that work? Okay, thank you. Councillor Pringle, did I see you wave your little finger at me a little while ago?
You did, in
Thank
the most nicest way possible. This report's vital. More so in today's. Well, I say today, we've always had objections between different faiths, haven't we? I think today there's an inclusion within faiths that is recognised for everybody. I know my granddaughter's just done something on the Sikh faith at infant school, and she was buzzing about understanding what it was about. I think in the report 22-23 in particular, 2.4 probably highlights the reasons why this is so important, in the fact that SACRE has not received any formal requests from schools facing withdrawal from these issues in today's society. That's an incredible statement, and one which should be spoken about to the max. And then when somebody has requested removal from any school, then the facility to do so has been open and transparent, and that's something else which again should be shouted about. And then there have been no complaints about the teaching of RE in schools. Cracking me out. I can't say that locally about maths and English. There's every blooming week somebody's on to that. So the RE position here in schools is way above our standard learning, which is recognised. So, I welcome the report. I think even Councillor Elliott probably needs to attend as chairman of the group to be here with us to understand it as long with anybody from SACRE, to be honest. But I welcome the report. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I'm a Christian. I go to church when he allows me in, I'll have to say. But I think the value is greater than one religion these days, and that's recognised with those people that are listed within the members that attend. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. I just hope you don't have to spend too much time kneeling at the confessional box. Right, may I just ask Martin to read out any further recommendations that have arisen from the discussion?
I think I've got this right for what Peter said. So that the 2023-24 SACRE annual report we received at the January 2025 meeting of the Children and Family Select Committee, and then secondly that further work through SACRE be carried out with the Multi-Academy Trust regarding provision and delivery of RE.
Okay, so I'm going to move those additional recommendations, if I can have a seconder.
Chairman, second.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to take a vote on the additional recommendation and the original recommendation. If you can have a show of hands for, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 8. I am conscious of the time, so what I was going to suggest was let's see how we get through agenda item number 8, and then we might take a very brief break if necessary. Okay, so agenda item number 8, Children and Families Departmental Performance, Risks and Financial Position for Quarter 2 of Year 2023-24. I'd like to invite Councillor Tracy Taylor Cabinet Member for Children and Families, and Councillor Sam Smith, Cabinet Member for Education and Send, to introduce the report. Councillors.
Give way to experience.
So, obviously, this is a data set. It is frustrating to me that with the changes we've had from the committee system to the cabinet system, this is another piece of work which would have been regularly reported to the committee, and it's taken us a while just to get back into where it is the best place to have this aired and shared. So the financial position of the department is well reprised within the pages. Again, another frustration for officers for next time. If we are going to have graphs, can we have colour copies of the papers, please? Yeah, Councillor Callahan's with me on that one. Yeah. But so, you know, the information is here. It does show where the pressures are. So Councillor Smith and I have different responsibilities and different pressures. Mine are obviously in the social care world, where we've got the high cost of placements. He'll speak to education and Send and the challenges there. Again, I suggest that the best way to approach this is to just receive colleagues' questions. Councillor Smith, I don't know if you've got anything to say at this point.
Open up to questions.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to move the recommendations on page 74, if I can have a seconder.
A second.
Thank you. So I'm now going to open up to the floor for debate. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Callahan.
Yeah, I've done my own draft, which is from Notts County Council. And just looking at the Nottinghamshire, the regional and the statistical neighbours, we're not doing great when it comes to EHCP plans and doing them within the time frame of 20 weeks. We're doing quite poor, actually. And I know we've spoke about this a little bit before in the other reports that we've been doing. So what we're going to do about it for next year, or this year in fact, to get that better, our data set to better, really.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Councillor Callahan, for that question. One of the key highlights that is detailed in the report, forgive me, I can't find the page offhand, is that EHCPs issued within the timescale set out by legislation is up 36%. If you're part of that 36%, that's fantastic. If you're not part of that 36%, it can be difficult for families. We've acknowledged that. The Send Improvement Board is doing a lot of work across the partnership to focus on increasing that percentage that we do within the timeframes. I think what we spoke about at length in a previous item is the work that the council is doing. We're employing more educational psychologists. We're working with SENCOs in school. We're working with, and there's a big project of work going on with early year settings, but it is a partnership, and I think through the Send Improvement Board we've got a fantastic relationship now with the ICB, colleagues in health, to build on that as well. So it has improved massively from where we were, but there is a hell of a lot of work to do. I sit on the Send Improvement Board. I'm banging on about getting the voice of the parent and child out there, and all these improvements that we're doing look great on a paragraph in a report or on a graph in colour, more better than black and white. But we need to show families what that improvement means to them, particularly if they're outside of the 36% that I mentioned. And that's something the Send Improvement Board are looking at. I raised it at the last meeting, which was last week. We're going to publicise the impact on parents and families with the improvement programme on the website so that people can actually read that as well. But we're doing a lot of work to address it.
Councillor Callahan.
Yeah, just one more question on the EHCP plans. They are a legal document. However, there are lots of families who have got EHCP plans and they're not worth the paper they're written on, because these children are still not getting their needs met when in actual fact it says so on this document, this is what these children need. And I am referring to children in Mansfield. I don't know about the rest of the county, because I do know that's true. What are we going to do to support these families?
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Councillor Callahan. Obviously, you'll be aware that there are annual reviews as part of the EHC process. Those reviews tend to be carried out by the education setting, i.e. SENCOs and the schools. If that's not the case, then there are caseworkers assigned to each family where queries can be fed back and things addressed through that. If I take what you mean about need, if you're talking about SEND school places, I don't know if I'm interpreting you wrong, so tell me if I am. The County Council is committed to a £40 million programme to deliver more SEND schools. Just last week or the week before, you sat with me, I think it was you, sat with me on a panel to appoint an academy trust to open a new 160-place school in Mansfield for SEND, and those places will be on board by September 25. We're doing a lot of work to address the need, as I mentioned to Councillor Pringle earlier. Demand for these services is rising, so there will always be a bit of a lag to delivering that, sadly. But what we do in Nottinghamshire far better than our statistical neighbours, if I'm allowed to say that, is ensure that whilst these children may need a special school place, they are catered for within mainstream settings, and we do that far better than a lot of councils through the funding streams we mentioned earlier, whether that's high level needs or AFN funding that SENCOs can bid for to support that child in mainstream schools while they're waiting for their special school place. With that said, we do need to increase special school places in Nottinghamshire, and we're spending £40 million to do so.
Peter.
If I can just add, thanks, just to build on that, I think one of the really important things around understanding and knowing that education, health and care plan is having the impact it should have, and that young person is receiving the support they need, is getting that feedback from parents and carers as well. So that work around the annual review, yes, they take place, but getting that feedback in is partly why we sent the survey out to the number of parents that we talked about earlier on and had that relatively small response. So building that into the EHC annual review process is critical, because we want to make sure we're hearing from parents and carers so that we can identify challenges and we can get the support right. I've got some lovely bits of feedback from that survey we did. I won't read them out, but it was heartening to read some of the positive feedback from parents and carers where they feel actually this is effective. So we want to capture that systematically so that we can have that assurance and that oversight. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, and
Councillor Keller.
And I support that. However, how many families have you got the information from that have gone to the Ombudsman because of not getting what they're supposed to have on their EHCP plans? So how many in Nottinghamshire are currently going in that direction rather being headed off at the pass before we get to that stage?
Thank you, Councillor Callahan. I think those figures get reported to the Governance and Ethics Committee. We will go away and get those for you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Looking at the data set contained within this appendix, the percentage of care leavers in education, employment or training aged 19 to 21 is 50.9%, and below the national average, which is 56%. Would you agree with me that the fact that nearly half of care leavers almost drop out of the system completely is unacceptable? And what are the council going to do to assist our most vulnerable young people? If you answer me that one, then I've got one or two little points I need to bring up as well.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot.
I think we'll tag team this, shall we? Councillor Taylor can come more onto the care point. I think if you read paragraph 28, page 71 of the report, it says 12.4% of children in care for the last 12 months achieved the same 9 to 5 grades in English and maths, and that's a 2.8% increase compared to last year, and is above the national average. That's something we can be really proud of. Every child, no matter their background or who they are and where they are, should get access to a good quality education, and I think Nottinghamshire should be proud of the fact that we're above the national average for those children in care receiving similar grades to those who aren't. Obviously, there's always more work to be done, and we work with our education settings to do that. But I think if you read paragraph 28, we should be shouting that from the rooftops. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. In respect to the looked after children, I mean, there's two parts, aren't there? There's the need, and then there's looked after children. It is true to say, and I'll ask Amanda to comment in a minute, a lot of our older children are care leavers, or even our upper age looked after children may well be unaccompanied asylum seeking children. So we do have, when we're reporting data sets, there are the things that we do to encourage the children that have been in our care to continue in education, or whether that's training, apprenticeships or whatever. There are also children who come to us very late who already may or may not be in education. And there are also that very discrete cohort of children, unaccompanied asylum seeking children, who may for very specific reasons be or not be in education, employment or training. So I think it's quite hard when you're looking at a data set like this, that it doesn't actually tell a story when you just read a number. I don't know if Amanda would like to help me out with sort of more technical comment there.
Yeah, I can do. Looked after children are obviously encouraged to attend school. I think Councillor Smith has just, sort of like pointed out the achievements made. I think that once when a child is getting older, we have achievement advisors within the teams who will be talking to children about what their aspirations might be. They'll be encouraged to attend taster days for sort of like employment. There's a lot of employers that we're currently working with in order to, hook children into thinking about what they might want to do, their aspirations for the future. Care leavers up until the age of 21 have a personal advisor who as well will assist them in trying to achieve their aspirations, whatever they may be. In terms of the statistics and why we are lower than statistical neighbours, I don't know the answer to that, but I think that we do all that we can actively to encourage those care leavers that we've got responsibility for to be either in education or employment or in training of some description. The number of unaccompanied children at this moment in time is 90, and I think as Councillor Taylor has already said, some children come to us quite late. So some children come into care when they're 16, 17. The unaccompanied asylum seekers are usually in the older age range. And I think because of that, then actually hooking them back into full-time education or employment or training is difficult. Not to say that we don't absolutely try to do our best with those children.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Kerry, then we're going to have Councillor Lee and Councillor Creamer. Councillor Kerry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to come back on some of the issues that were mentioned by Councillor Callaghan about some issues in areas of deprivation. I have an area of deprivation in my division where there are complex family needs, and I know that a lot of good work is being done. I think the key issue from my point of view is once we as members get involved of any issues that we know about, it's feeding through the officers and the team so they can make sure that they're doing the best they can at that time, I think, to improve the lives of those families. Well, Councillor Smith's already alluded to some of the data in the report, particularly one where we're comparing the national figures for child and family assessments completed in timescale. We've been above the national average, and I just that points to a lot of the good work we're doing and some of the early work we did as part of being a beacon authority, if you like, in making those improvements. I just wonder one thing we might be able to do in terms of the reports at the back, or the data at the back, where there could be an extra column with direction of travel, if you like, where it says high is good and not, but are we improving? So we can focus in on the issues here that we might need to address in further scrutiny. Thank you.
Lucy's picked that one up. I mean, looking at the papers we've got, to be fair, they're not formatted very well. The stats are falling off the edge of the paper, so it's just a little bit of a housekeeping task as well as an extra line of information.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerry. Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. And there's a question to do with the governance and ethics, and as you know, I'm the vice chairman on that, and I'm happy to go away and get the information for you, or please attend the meeting. However, off the top of my head, I don't believe that in the foreseeable, in about the last year, that we've had any claims go against us to do with not meeting the need. We obviously had a few during COVID, but we have to remember that with governance and ethics, a lot of the stuff that we deal with is from years ago, and it does catch up. I have seen a noticeable improvement of the cases coming through, and most of them actually coming through are us not being able to meet that date time need, not meeting the assessment after they are done. And I've got to give credit to officers on that we have definitely seen an improvement coming through. So I'd like to thank officers on that. But if you'd like to come to the committee, I'm sure the chairman will be more than happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Smith.
Well, just to say thank you, Councillor Lee, that's a very helpful comment, but Peter has already inquired about the stats that you require, so we'll share those anyway.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Creamer.
Thank you, Chair. Bit of an echo there. Just actually a question on paragraph 27 and the diagram that goes with it, explaining the percentage of pupils going in grade 9 to 5 GCSEs. And it's been said it's now back to pre-pandemic levels, which is just bad, but it's actually going back to pre, if you like, 2018, 2019. And during the pandemic levels, we were actually having an increase. So we're doing something right there. So although it looks like we're back to levels, we are actually down from where we were in the pandemic. So I was just wondering what we were doing right there, or what the effect is, what's happened that we haven't stayed on the higher level.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. During COVID, children didn't sit exams, so that it was all teacher assessed. So there was, of course, an inflation in the figures nationally. What these data in front of you and paragraph 27 alludes to is the fact that now children are sitting exams again. There'll be a drop nationally, but we're in line with the national average. So it's just going back to, we're even better than the national average. So it's just going back to pre-pandemic, where actually children sat exams that were marked.
Thank you. Councillor Creamer. Okay, thank you. Did we have anyone else? Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you. I just look at the statistics, and there are one or two issues that really ought to be addressed. I mean, the proportion of child protection cases, we went up to 86.4%, and then suddenly we dropped again in the quarter one at 86.4%, and we dropped to 83.6% in quarter two. I just what was the reason for that? Because normally when we suddenly improve things, we normally continues. But so a drop in the paper. I just love to know what the reason behind that is. And kinship placements, we set a target of 12%, which is tiny in any respect, but to only get 8.3% of children in care currently reside in kinship placements. I just wondered what the reason, the reduction in that is. Why aren't we meeting the actual targets? Is there a problem that there isn't enough people able for us to call upon, or what is the situation on that? And finally, the gap in proportion of disadvantaged pupils who have received free school meals down from 32% to 29.5%. I just wondered why that had dropped. Because it's essential we make sure that free school meals for children in need are absolutely essential. Thank you. Oops.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Smith, are you taking this? Or Councillor Taylor?
Yeah. No. Can I just go back with a question to start with? It would be really helpful, Councillor Wilmot, if you could say which part of the report you're looking at when you're asking the question.
Okay.
Because at the moment I'm just flicking through pages trying to catch up with your questioning. So Child protection cases, are you looking at the table or the narrative?
Yeah, the disabled, yeah.
You're looking at the table there,
Yeah.
okay. And how about the other questions about kinship carers and the gap in the free school meals? Are these all questions from the tables? Because a lot of the questions you've asked are actually explained in the narrative.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking. Okay. So with your indulgence, Chair, I'm actually going to pass over to officers to just explain the stats. So Amanda, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, thank you, Amanda.
Yes, no problem. So there has been a drop, as you rightly noticed, and that was to do with staff absence. So there was a particular period of time when there were an absence of. It was the child protection coordinators actually who chair the meetings. So that has impacted on the figures, as you can see. But the other thing that we're actually doing within children's social care at this moment in time is really looking at how we can become far more needs-led rather than process-driven. So sometimes, rather than have a meeting in time scale, if it means we go slightly out of time scale, we might choose to do that to make sure that the meeting is meaningful and that the right people are there around the table, rather than just having a meeting within timescales for the sake of having a meeting. So sometimes we would absolutely, our ambition would be to hit 100%, but actually sometimes for certain families it might be more helpful to have a meeting slightly later. I'm not saying we'd go wildly out of timescales, but what I'm saying is to have a meeting that's then correct and the right people are around the table who are able to make the right decisions is more meaningful than just having a meeting for the sake of bringing it into timescales. So I think that's the explanation for the data around the repeat child protection plans. Do you want to say anything more? Sorry. Yeah, I mean with kinship care, again, I'll ask you to come back in, Amanda. But in essence, it doesn't follow that there are carers to take on children in a kinship role. Not all children have those wider family networks which would allow them to be cared for in a kinship setting. Not all extended family members are in a position to take on a kinship role. Again, I don't know whether you would comment in a more technical way, Amanda, about our performance stats. I think it's fair to say that we were ambitious, setting a target of 12% of children living in kinship placements, and I think it's absolutely right to be ambitious. But Councillor Taylor's absolutely right in what she says. For some children, they can't remain within their birth families or within their extended family networks for very good reasons, and therefore they will then they'll need a formal placement. We will always look to family before we consider bringing a child into care. We'll always explore what the support needs are of that family, so whether that is that they become kinship carers through a regulated fostering route, or whether they have an order that's granted by the court in order for them to continue to care for the child without having the looked after status, if you like. But we've also got a kinship support team at this moment in time that you'll be aware of, who does actually provide support for kinship carers specifically around the issues that they may be dealing with. The other thing that we are actively progressing and introducing is this concept of family networking. So making sure that from the very beginning of our involvement with children, that we absolutely know who all of the wider family are, who the family networks are, in order that we can make sure that we are absolutely supporting those people to care for the children within their communities and within their families. So it's absolutely our ambition to do that, but I think the 12% was perhaps an ambitious target. I think the other thing that we're doing for those children who we are currently looking after is making sure that we have the regular conversations in terms of their families, their birth families, what's happening for them now. They may have been in care for 5 years, things may have moved on significantly during that time for families. So we're really, really aware of and cited on making sure that if there is an opportunity for a child to leave our care and to be placed with a family member, that's absolutely what we would do. We would support that.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to answer Councillor Wilmot's question regarding the gap in those achieving 95 grades in English and Maths compared to those from disadvantaged areas, including those on free school meals. You're right, there has been a drop in that and the gap has widened. We are we're down from 32%, but we are on 29.5% achieving grades 9 to 5, and that is higher than the national average of 26.7%. The county council has acknowledged the gap. Obviously, that can the circumstances of that could be around a lot of reasons. One of them may be around poor attendance. What the county council is doing is we are reviewing our improving education for all strategy through a partnership board, and education settings are sitting on that board. By updating that strategy and having a particular focus around attendance, I was briefed on this last week, by having a particular focus on attendance, that allows the board to hold stakeholders, which are the schools, to account on what they're doing to address those things. So we are still higher than the national average, but we acknowledge that more work needs to be done, and that's what the updated improving education for all strategy will look to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, just to correct Councillor Smith, and I think it's sometimes we get it back to front because of how things are worded. The gap has narrowed, it has not widened. So the gap previously was 32 and is now 29.5. So it is an improvement, but it is still behind the national average, and that's where the concerns remain and the attention must remain focused. But the current position is actually an improvement on the previous position.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. John.
My final question is about the overspend of £2.5 million on the overall children and families department, the revenue budget. I just wondered if that's going to be addressed by the time of March 31st. And the other one is about
Councillor Wilmot.
Yeah.
You said your final question. I'm conscious of the time. We need to leave this room.
This is part of the question.
I understand that, but you said you've read the papers before you came in, and forgive me if I'm incorrect, but it does look like we're finding things as we go along. So you've had your fair share of questions.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that there's other important agenda items that we need to discuss, and I don't want to curtail any of those. So if you can make it very brief, please.
Yeah, very briefly. Just a quick question about the high cost residential placements. The average is usually 6,000 a week, but it seems to be that you've got somebody at 18,000 a week. So can someone give me some information on that? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Who wants to take that one, please? Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, I was just checking which of the officers would pick that one up as well, and I think it might be Rachel in a moment. The short answer is it's not that we're just going and spending more money than we should. Some children have more complex needs, and as is well explained in the pages of the report, where there is an external private profit-making market for children's care, if we don't have the internal capacity, either through our foster carers or through children's homes, we will need to commission places, and according to the complexity of the needs of an individual child, then that may cost more per week than in others. So I can't remember whether it's summarised in the papers or not, but where if we have just a handful of high cost placements, and I'm trying to remember what the figures are that Colin's been using, where we've got some that are in the region of 20,000 a week, that suddenly becomes 2 million on the overall bill. That's not a cost that we can control, in the sense that if a child has needs and we have a duty to have the care of that child, we will seek to place them where their needs are going to be best met. What we don't have control over is the market, which charges us extortionate prices for what they're doing. I have my own opinions on that, and they're probably not best expressed in this place now. But I will just ask Rachel to comment briefly on the nature of those high cost placements and the impact that they have on the overall budget.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. For colleagues that don't know, I'm the incoming Service Director for Commissioning and Resources in place of Lawrence Jones. I just took over last week. So I'm only 4 days in post, so I've not got to full grips with it yet. The mitigations around this are set out in point 36. As Councillor Taylor references, there is very little we can do to control the external market, and we need sort of action at a national level to help with that high cost placement. What we are doing and what our focus will be in the next year is about growing our own internal specialist placement. So we've not historically had specialist placements that we run ourselves, and so colleagues like Jenny and wider officers are working on what can we do so that these young people that have extremely complex needs can go into our own provision where we can control costs, in addition to things like growing our kinship provision, growing our support to keeping children with complex needs at home, which will also help us bring that overspend down.
Rachel, thank you very much. Before I move on to Councillor Pringle, Councillor Wilmot, please don't misinterpret my words. I do appreciate and respect your thoroughness, but we've got a full agenda to get through. There's still 3 agenda items, and there's other people that need to be involved. Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back as we celebrate paragraph 28 and 2.8% percentage point increase, taking us to 12.4%. That means 87.6% didn't reach those grades. So we're all on the same page as regarding increasing that. There's no question about that. Really glad, Councillor Smith, that you picked up the attendance issue. I've got that marked as one of the questions to ask you now. I think that's something which is so often overlooked and has such a huge impact when it's too easy for people not to attend. So I think if there's something that we can do to increase that attendance, we'll see positives immediately on this. My question, Chairman, is reference to page 73 of the 106 papers, C17, workforce recruitment and retention, and it's really based on the statutory timescales, in particular referencing the fact that there's inclusion of recruitment and retention difficulties that impacts on the quality of the council, the council's ability really to assess the needs of children within this statutory. What's the impact, and how are we going to correct it? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Councillor Smith.
Just to address attendance, as I said earlier, yeah, we acknowledge it's a really big part of education. If you miss a day, I think it's something like, if you miss one day, you miss a week of learning, I think, in the primary sector particularly, where lesson after lesson follows on from what you learned yesterday. We are addressing that through the Improving Education for All strategy, as I said. So attendance currently isn't a key performance indicator in that strategy at the moment. We're going to add that in, and then that is through a stakeholder board where education settings sit on it. It's endorsed by the authority, and then we can hold education providers to account to increase attendance through there. On your workforce question, I'm going to pass over to colleagues. I don't know if it's Peter, is it C17?
I was referencing the statutory requirements by council more than anything else, and the fact that we recognise the issues that's raised. Thank you.
Sorry.
So I think what that risk identifies is that across our range of regulated services, both in children's social care and in our support for children with special educational needs, workforce supply is a real challenge for us, as it is for other authorities around the country. So I think in our earlier conversation around support for children with special educational needs, Peter described the kind of longer term strategy around growing our own educational psychologists and seeking to increase capacity. But in the interim, we're also employing additional agency educational psychologists in order to make sure that we have the capacity to secure the improvements necessary. That's something that we've seen for some considerable time in children's social care, where we've needed to and continue to engage agency social work colleagues where necessary in order to make sure that we've got manageable caseloads for our staff working with our children and families. Of course, that brings with it a financial risk because of the costs associated. So one of the things that we persistently seek to balance is trying to make sure that we've got the capacity necessary in the short term to be able to support children and families, whether that's with those with special educational needs or those in need of help and protection, but also to make sure that we're focusing on our own workforce and securing additional routes into whether it's social work or educational psychology, in order that we have a more sustainable approach moving forwards. So on a social care side, we do lots of work with our local universities. We've grown the number of apprentice social workers we have, for example, and have diversified the routes into social work. So it's some of the learning from that we've been pulling across into the work that we're doing to support children with SEND, to try and make sure that we've got not just the workforce for now, but the workforce for the future.
If I can, Chairman, so just so that I'm clear, then our statutory obligations to this group are covered by the fact that we're trying hard. Is that what we're saying?
If I may, so we've increased in terms of our statutory responsibilities for children with SEND. If I pick up that, if that's okay, Councillor Pringle. So we've increased our educational psychology capacity, which has had a direct impact. In fact, it's halved the amount of the longest period of time somebody will wait for an assessment for an education, health and care plan, which was up to a 12-month wait, is now a 6-month maximum wait, which isn't good enough. But we're continuing to increase that capacity and reduce those waiting times. So it's within the confines of what we have available. So we're making a direct impact on that through our educational psychologists. Similarly, we've invested in the locum EP that I talked about earlier on, which is delivering a number of assessments per month, which helps support our statutory timescales as well. We also have our SEND assessment teams within the Integrated Children's Disability Service. We've invested significant additional investment in those teams financially to increase capacity to manage the increased number of annual reviews and the increased number of education, health and care plans. It's a very, very tough environment to work in. So retention is a huge issue, because one of the things that's really challenging for parents and carers is changes in caseworkers, regular changes in caseworkers. So that we're bringing new staff in and we're putting that financial investment in, it takes time to grow and develop a team that's robust enough to deliver what's required across the board. But there's significant investment gone into that in the last 8 months, and we'll continue to seek that investment where it's needed to meet our statutory demands.
Yeah. So, Chairman, sorry, just for clarity, because the council leader raised the issues that come to governance and ethics groups with regards the need of challenge within this. Because of our statutory need within this group, we are saying now that we are covered because of the positives that we've put in place, in which case, what are you saying no for? Because that's how I'm understanding it. In which case, there will be no further challenges going to governance and ethics.
Councillor Taylor.
Again, I think it's how we sometimes phrase our questions and answers, Mike, and I see this as two sides of the same coin in a way. Nobody is saying what you believe that they are saying. This portion of the report is flagging in very clear terms what the risks are that the council faces in undertaking its business. So you've picked out C17, but there are the 3 other risk areas. So it's not a question of saying this is an alibi or an excuse or we are covered. This is a very clear way of saying in the scrutiny setting, which seems to me the right place to have it aired and understood, that these are the real risks. So one of those is workforce recruitment and retention poses an ongoing real risk to our ability to meet our statutory needs, and therefore, so it's not about saying we've got our backsides covered because we've put it here. What we're saying is we're working like heck to manage recruitment and retention, but it remains a very real risk to our ability to meet those statutory obligations. Yeah.
So, well said, Eric. So, I'm not questioning the disability to provide. I'm recognising what was said earlier about the increase to the provision, which are protective of the statutory services mentioned in C17, which Councillor Lee raised was an issue with governance and ethics. Yeah?
Councillor Lee.
Chairman, at governance and ethics, we will always have challenge. As we know, the Ombudsman doesn't always agree with how we see things, and that's why we've got a meeting with them next week. It's the Ombudsman usually finds what they want to find, and sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't agree. But we will always have challenge at governance and ethics, no matter if it's challenging. This department or another department will always have challenge, and sadly, with an authority this large, you're always going to see challenge by residents and by the ombudsman. All we can do at governance and ethics is hold the departments to account, ask the questions, and hopefully, if you're interested, you can always attend.
Right, thank you everyone. Before I move to the vote on the recommendations on page 74, there are no further recommendations, but if we do look on page 74 at recommendation number 2, it asks that we consider whether it would be beneficial to take part in an externally facilitated workshop with Cabinet members with us today to develop an increased understanding of performance indicators relating to children and families. Now, I'm not sure whether that should be externally facilitated. I'm happy to take some advice on that, but certainly anything that helps us improve our understanding and maybe some of the context as well as just pure data, I think is probably a benefit to us all. So rather than consider it, I'd like to ask the committee members if we can agree on that as a recommendation that we do it, and that would also include members that come onto this scrutiny panel as substitutes. You'd be more than welcome to come along as well. So I'm going to include that if we're happy with that. Yeah, seem to have consensus with that. Okay, so I am going to go to vote and ask for a show of hands on the recommendations on page 74. All those in favour? Again, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Again, I am conscious of the time, so I'm going to push along with item number 9, which is provision of support to looked after children transitioning out of the care system. And I will say to people, we've got approximately 34 minutes before the room needs to be prepared for the police and crime panel. So I invite Councillor Tracy Taylor, Cabinet Member for Children and Families, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Before I do, because several people at this side of the chamber are supposed to be in another meeting starting at 1 o'clock and running till 3, so just for those members involved, I've asked Amanda to reconvene that for a 2 o'clock start and truncate it till 3 o'clock, which should allow us to finish your meeting, Chairman, and take a comfort break. Just
Thank
so
you
everybody
very
knows. Thank you for the
Councillor
indulgence.
Taylor.
So this probably touches on some of the elements in Councillor Wilmot's question, I guess, because he asked about things like need and looked after children. So again, this is a regular report about the provision of support by this council to children who are transitioning out of the care system. Speaks particularly to things like those personal advisor opportunities, access to mentoring, and whether it's work experience or interviews experience. So we did actually cover this at the corporate parenting panel recently. We also had a briefing on it there, so some members in this room will also be familiar with it from those discussions. So again, I think to hand over for questions, Chair, and for officers to respond, and so that we can provide that more detailed information.
Okay, so I'm going to move the recommendations on page 86 and seek a seconder.
No, a second.
Thank you very much. So I'll now open up to the floor. And Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. Me and my little girl was talking about this exact same thing last week, and we were discussing about what happens to children in care when they're no longer in care. And obviously, we know it's now increased to 21, and every single councillor here is a corporate parent. And my little girl thought it was very funny that I'm a corporate parent for lots of children that she's never met, and she wants to meet them all. So it was very funny. However, I think the question is what a lot of people may not understand, and my little girl definitely didn't understand is what happens to these children when they get to 18, 21, when they need help and support. Obviously, there's some of it in the report, but it's like my little girl, when she's 30, I'm sure I'll get a phone call asking for £20 when she's short of it, or she runs out of fuel, or she's got a phone bill. What support is in place for the long-term provision of our children? I do say our children when they go on in the future, because obviously we know they're looked after until they're 21. What happens past that?
Thank you, Councillor.
So
Councillor
I'll start, and it's important to recognise this report, Councillor Lee, today is a response to scrutiny that we've had of this subject before. So the questions that the panel raised previously are now being addressed in here. To answer your specific question today, we have an ongoing responsibility not until young people are 21, but until they're 25. But I perfectly accept what you're saying about your own family, and you know, my children are 24 and 26. I can see them being, or me being 94 or 96. Parental responsibility doesn't leave you in that way, but it is a truism, it's a sad fact of the care system that there is a point in time at which the children we have cared for are adults who are living by their own means and treading their own life path. They cannot be in the care of the state for their entire lives. Sadly, some may need state care in different ways and forms because of the difficult childhood experiences they've had. But our care responsibilities go on until they're 25. Some of the stuff in here today was a specific breakpoint at 18 or 21, depending on circumstances. But we have and we hold that responsibility until our care leavers are 25, and that's effected through the support workers. I don't know whether Amanda or Jenny would like to comment on that.
No, children have a personal advisor until they're 21, and then once they're 21, there's an over 21 service, and they can contact that service should they need support up until the age of 25. But again, sort of like building on what I was talking about earlier, we absolutely seek to link children who are looked after, who then become care leavers, back into their families, back into their communities, to make sure that they have actually got trusted adults in their lives that they can turn to in times of need once they turn 25 plus. And I think that's one of the big ambitions of stable homes built on love. So yes, we're definitely working towards that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Councillor Wilmot.
So this is one of the most important points this morning or this afternoon now. Looked after children transitioning out of the care system into employment, if possible employment. But my question is that it seems that 138 young people have attended employability briefings since 2022. I just wondered how many actually got jobs from this attended employability briefing. It says on section 4, most successful outcomes were mainly work experience and taster days and this, that and the other. But it only shows that one person actually got a job from that. Now the other issue, my second question, and only my second because time's going very quickly. The local offer for care leavers was published in 2019. I've looked it up, and that's when it was published, and it's now under review again. The updated local offer was meant to be published in December 2023. As someone substituting in this meeting, I'm just out of the loop. Can I ask if it has been published? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilmot. Councillor Taylor.
Okay, I'll take the points in order. The first one, the purpose of the employability briefings is not simply to secure jobs. We don't have the power to guarantee jobs. So again, slightly mixing up activities and outcomes. So I would have to ask officers how many of our care leavers have now moved into employment, but it doesn't follow that any employment that they have secured will be with the people in the employability briefings or directly as a result of those, and there's no reason to correlate those figures. They are two separate things. It's about encouraging the young people and giving them the opportunities to engage with employers so they have a sense of what they need to do to make themselves employable. So this is about providing them with opportunities, what you might have called careers advice and opportunities in old parlance. I've already forgotten what the other question was. It has been a horrendously long session.
Care leavers offer.
Yes, the care leavers offer. Again, I'll check with officers whether the care leavers offer was 21.3 or 21.24. But I do know from the Looked After Children and Care Leavers Partnership Board last week that the offer, if not published, is certainly well underway and more or less concluded. So if officers can comment on the publication of that. Yeah, the offer was for 4 years. It was over. That was the lifetime of that offer, and we've got a refreshed offer, which is being. It's actually with our comms department at this moment in time, to do whatever they need to do with it. But it's ready. It's ready to go and to be published. So we're on to that.
So, when can we see this happen? Is it possible to get a date?
Yeah, I can follow that up. Yeah.
Okay. John, you happy with that? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Keller.
Yeah, I welcome this report, and I think there has been a lot done to support care leavers in our community. And I'm just going to put my Mansfield hat on. And for accommodation providers, we take this really seriously in Mansfield, and we've got protected factors for children, needing a home, and we've got teams that actually offer support not just around their housing but everything else as well. So they're not just dropped or whatever. There is ongoing support, and it's not just about Notts County Council, it's about everybody out there. So it's not really a question.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, and I think it's important to pick up on what Councillor Callaghan's referenced, because again this was debated at the recent corporate parenting panel, and we had a presentation from the Chief Officer of Ashfield Council, as it happened, representing all of the district and borough leads, and those district and borough leaders are active and firmly embedded partners in the Looked After Children and Care Leavers Partnership. So we do have things like the council tax exemptions for the care leavers, the leisure passes, and recognition of their needs in housing, which is what Councillor Callaghan was referencing. So I think it is important in that context to recognise the work and the genuine investment of our district and borough partners in the offer and in supporting the county's children.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Callaghan.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that stood out for me in this report was the narrative around foster parents and the difficulty that we have in terms of recruitment of foster parents, and it's certainly something that's caught my eye. I've spoken to a few of the committee members, and it's something that I think we'd like to look at from a scrutiny point of view to see if there's anything that we can do to come up with suggestions or recommendations how we might help.
Sorry, Chair, I was just trying to check with officers because the recruitment and retention of foster carers is a key work stream, obviously, because of some of the other financial challenges we've looked at in terms of high cost external placements, but also the fact that children are better cared for in homes. There is a national shortage of foster carers. It's a national trend. We saw it through COVID with people either exiting or not having the new enquiries, and I was trying to work out that there is a current work stream. I don't know if it's on your scrutiny programme, if it's on, I think, on the corporate parenting panel. So there are other places it's a live topic. So the question will be how that can link in to meet what you're asking.
That was partly the question, because clearly it's an area of some considerable importance. I mean, we've got people because they're going into care because the foster provision isn't there. I'm also conscious that, well, I'm new to the position. I don't want to be treading on toes unnecessarily or duplicating work. But if it's an area that there's a common interest in, if we can support that, it's certainly a discussion I'd like to have with you at first, and maybe something to bring back to the committee for discussion in April.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take advice from Scrutiny officer because I don't understand some of the structures, but whether it's appropriate to put onto one of your scrutiny agendas what is in effect a briefing note or a synopsis of work that's going on in other places for you to consider, because it might not be a piece of work you need to scrutinise, it might be something you do choose to scrutinise. So I'm not sure what we can do to give the committee members a sense of what work's going on where, you know, that you can make that decision. So I'll ask for advice on that one.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Taylor. What I'll do is I'll consult with Martin and just review that and come back to you directly. Okay, thank you. So if there's nothing else, the recommendations are on page 86. That's not a recommendation to add, so I'm going to take that last point separately. So I'm going to put that to the vote. So can I have a show of hands to accept the recommendations? Okay, thank you. That is unanimous. And now we move on to item number 10. And I would lose it because it's my bit that I'm going to talk about. So this is the outcomes of the review of the revised elective home education policy. So this was my first introduction to this committee. We had a task and review committee just shortly before Christmas. It was well represented, and I thank all the committee members that took part. So we took a draft report and response. We looked at that. We've made a few minor changes. Those items of change are under the findings in point 13. Much of that is terminology. We did make one point that I think was well received within the scrutiny committee, where I think where we've got people that are going into the elected home education system, sometimes it's quite an emotive time for families, and it seemed that the response would be that if they did not respond to offers of help or guidance, that we would sort of automatically move into the annual performance assessment framework, etc. So what we've done is we recommended that we add in at least one additional step in there, that perhaps we go back after a few weeks when maybe emotions are not quite as high, and offer that help again before we go into sort of formal procedures with parents and things. I thought that was a pretty good step and a good recommendation that we made. But that is the report. I'm going to move the recommendations and ask for a seconder. The recommendations on page 92. Ask for a seconder.
Second, Joe.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open that up to the floor for discussion. Councillor Callaghan.
So on page 89, the elected home education, obviously the figure has doubled or nearly doubled since 2018. We know some of that is through COVID related, anxiety for children going back out, and some families choosing to electively home educate. For me, there is a danger there as well, because some families can't educate themselves, let alone the children. And so it does raise concerns for me. And how are we working with some of those families? Because we haven't actually got the teeth to be able to go and say you need to work with either your school or with us to see what's happening to some of those children that are falling through the net, if you like to use that phrase, because we know there is quite a few children out there. And again, I'm talking about my area, which I know there are children being electively home educated that actually shouldn't be. And sometimes is that because some of these schools have issues or see these children as problems, so they tell the parents, well, if you remove these children, we won't permanently exclude. And so parents then take them out, they're off roll, and you cannot get a child back on roll on a lot of schools in my area. So I think that is a concern.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Callahan. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to address questions because, of course, that would have been done in the review of the policy, but just to acknowledge Councillor Callahan's point there, anybody who is subject to elective home education will have a review carried out by somebody in the local authority. Failure to comply with those reviews, which is written in the policy, could eventually result in a legal order for that child to attend school, and we do have measures in place to check how they're progressing, and as I say, if the parents don't open up to that review, then we can legally order them to attend school. With that answer, Chairman, can I just thank the cross-party representation who took part in this review. As the report makes clear in your words, Chairman, there are rising numbers of elected people who are choosing to be home educated, so it's a really important issue. I thank the committee for their suggested amendments to the policy. I will of course respond formally, which should come to your next meeting if I understand the process correctly. Martin and Lucy can tell me if I've got that wrong. So you will get my formal response, but I can confirm that I would expect your amendments to be part of the final version that's presented to me to approve shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Callahan, you okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and in the absence of any other hands or polite fingers, we will take a vote on the recommendations on page 92. All those in favour? Again, unanimous. Thank you all very much. And the final item for today is the work programme, and this will be introduced by Martin.
Yeah, so the work programme's there, just to note, just a couple of things. The review of pupil place planning, we're just trying to get the meeting dates sorted out. So hopefully we should get those dates out to you within the next week, and then obviously asking for volunteers for that one. So the scope will come out for reference as well for that one. And then just from the meeting we've had today, a couple of items that we can discuss with the chair and vice chair and officers for how we can look at them. So I've got obviously fostering recruitment, which was raised by the chair a few minutes ago, and then right at the beginning there was mentioned about access and waiting lists for CAMS. So I've got those two down. Is there anything else that anyone else would like to suggest for consideration?
No? Okay. Thank you very much. So, do we have agreement from the committee on the additional proposed items? Yeah. Okay, so thank you all. Oh, Councillor Callahan.
Do you know the on page 101 you've got children's transformation front door family hubs? That's to be considered for scheduling. Can you get a date on that one? Please.
Okay, happy, Councillor Callahan?
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, with that, I'm going to close this meeting, and thank you all very, very much for your contributions. Thank you.